Hey YouTube, it's Brian here. This is going to be my top 10 least favorite wrestling personalities in no particular order. This is going to be a list of onstage personalities like backstage, GMs and managers, and also, of course, the wrestlers themselves, all in one list, mostly from like the last 20 years or so. But yeah, there's people like John Laurinaitis or whatever, but it's mostly actual wrestlers, of course. You know how some people have great careers, but they start out like kind of under a stupid gimmick or two, like Dr. Isaac Yankem was uh, later on Kane, of course. Number one on here is going to be the Spirit Squad. You know how they were tag team champions under the Freebird rule. I'm putting them on this list under the Freebird rule also. This was a tag team of male cheerleaders. They got put into a feud with the odd midlife crisis Degeneration X um, in the late 2000s. This was a strange, kind of semi homophobic feud. Um, their tag reign was awful and really boring, I think. The only thing that you could say about this entire team is that Nikki went on to achieve some later notoriety as Dolph Ziggler. And even his pushes in his career haven't really worked out as well as it could have. He's been underutilized, of course. Number two on here, as previously mentioned in the intro, is going to be Dr. Isaac Yankem. This is Glenn Jacobs' gimmick before he found greater success as Kane in the WWE. He was supposed to be an evil dentist that like tormented his opponents in the ring. This is probably one of the stupidest characters in the history of wrestling. He was so hideously ugly in the ring with his blonde, curly mullet and his nasty brown teeth. I actually think I turned the match off when he came on screen. Uh, yeah, one of the ugliest in-ring characters I think I've ever seen, along with like maybe the Boogeyman or something. Um, Bone Soldier, I don't know. Let's get on to the next person on the list. Number three is going to be Shark Boy. Dressed in a comic book cartoonish like superhero attire of a shark. He had like a fin on his head. He was wearing weird blue spandex and red boots. This is one of TNA's weirdest wrestlers. I think he was really boring in the ring, but uh, for some reason he was kind of over with the fan base, kind of like Eugene with the fans in the WWE. They kind of cheered him for a while for no reason. I don't know. But yeah, he was really boring in the ring, and he was probably one of the reasons that TNA wasn't really taken seriously at the time. Okay, let's get on to number four. It's the Great Khali, one of the stiffest and most boring in-ring performers I've ever seen. His finisher sucked throughout the years. No matter what they changed it to, the karate brain chop or the Punjabi plunge. The xenophobia heel thing was an outdated gimmick. It um, kind of pinions back to like the Iron Sheik thing in the 80s. It makes you wonder, why are they still doing this into the 2000s? And you remember that awful Punjabi prison match with like the Undertaker? I think I saw him live against Kane and Batista. It was probably the worst match on the card. Um, he's like C3PO in terms of his stiffness and inability to actually move around the ring fluidly. Number five on this list is going to be John Laurinaitis. Though he had a wrestling career too, I believe he's probably most notorious for the unwatchably bad tenure he had on Raw as the quote unquote general manager. He had no personality, and his promos, I think they sucked the life out of the actual show. They had about as much life as his stoic zombie-like face, and I think that he made the show measurably worse than uh, any other individual person ever has in the history of the actual show. I think that I actually stopped watching the show for several weeks, and I was like a super heavy wrestling fan when I was a kid. I watched every show, like even the B shows. I watched every episode, and I think he actually made me stop watching for several weeks. Um, he was a measurably bad general manager. I don't know if any other GM, maybe uh, one that I'll mention in a second, but I don't know if there's any other WWE GM at least that's been that bad. Number 6 on here is going to be Bobby Lashley. I think he's a totally unnecessary clone of Ultimate Warrior, of Goldberg, of Batista. That guy who has basically a slam and a military press and a power slam, and that's their entire move set. He's stiff in the ring with boring, forgettable finishers. He sucked in TNA and MMA in his original WWE stint, and he's still boring when he returned later on, 10 years later, as an old, like weathered veteran. Um, I think that the guy doesn't really have any talent for wrestling, frankly. No insult to him as a person, but he just doesn't have any personality or any talent in the ring. Number 7 on here is going to be Scott Steiner. What happened to this guy athletically? He's now just a sunburned, aging bag of botches and abrasively bad promos. His hat when he was in TNA as Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner looked like a vegetable strainer. And it's sad to think that this guy was once part of something respected when he tagged with his brother. Um, okay, let's get to number 8 on this list, X Pac. His name is synonymous with extreme fan hatred. X-Pac heat is a widely used term. He teabagged people during his matches. That might be one of the reasons that he was so disliked. He was talentless and pretty much, frankly, pretty obnoxious, I think. Uh, yeah, let's get to number 9. Sorry, accidentally shrunk the window. Okay. Number 9 on here is going to be Dixie Carter. Not a huge fan of excessive involvement of the non wrestling talent and storylines, and when they receive too much of the time and promotion on the actual show, like the whole Vicky Guerrero thing with Edge, the McMahon all over the product. But yeah, Dixie Carter was always on screen. And when she started to manage TNA, it started to suck. She's like the worst of John Laurinaitis and Stephanie McMahon put together. She's one of the most vacuous and widely hated personalities in all of wrestling. I think that she killed that show in the end. Um, yeah, she's one of the people on this list that I would say I'm most critical of. Number 10 on here is one of the people that I frankly have more mixed opinions of. Uh, Here are some of the positives on Eric Bischoff, who is at number 10 on my list. Here's some of the positives. He's a fantastic heel. I'll give the guy that. As an on screen performer, he's a fucking amazing heel, and he always fires me up when I'm watching the show from like a kayfabe point of view. And this show was always seemingly great whenever he was manager. Um, but the bad elements, I would say, is that he's a smug, greasy douchebag with a plastic smile, and it's like a combined Vince McMahon with Alex Jones or something. Uh, but I feel like there was always, on a more serious note, I feel like there was always a more heavily underutilized presence of talent on the roster surrounding uh, something managed by Bischoff, like in the later years of WCW, or on Raw. I just felt like it was always synonymous with his presence as a manager that there was a lot of heavily underutilized talent. And though he presided over a successful era in wrestling during the Attitude Era, it seems like it was all in spite of him more than because of him. So that would be the bad elements of my criticism of Eric Bischoff. Yeah, that's why I'm putting him at number 10, even though there's a couple of positives on him and he seemingly was successful as a manager. I think he was a pretty bad booker, actually. That might be a controversial view, but yeah, tell me your views in the comments. Thanks for watching. Love you guys. I'm out.